So now we've gone over those basic settings: aperture, shutter speed, ISO, and you might still have a lot of questions. When should you change shutter speed? When should you change aperture? There were a couple of basic rules of thumb that I mentioned in the previous lessons, like your shutter speed shouldn't go slower than 1/60th or 1/80th of a second if you're handheld. As you get better with taking photos, you might be able to slow it down if you're really steady. Your ISO, I mentioned in the last lesson, shouldn't go above 1600 or 3200, of course, depending on your camera. But in general, you want to keep it as low as possible. Now, I didn't talk about the aperture that much, but the aperture affects more than just how much light is let in your camera or not. It also affects the depth of field, or how much is in focus. So imagine you're taking a photo from over here. We've got our camera over here. Your subject is over here. With a wide open aperture, meaning the hole is very open wide, meaning the f-stop is small, the number. Remember, the f2.8 is a wider open aperture than the f22. With that wide open aperture, your depth of field, or basically the plane of focus, what is in focus in your image, is very narrow. So that's how you get an image with a very blurry background. You open up your aperture as wide as possible to get less in focus. If you want more in focus, if you're shooting landscapes, for example, and you want everything from the trees that are 10 feet away from you to the waterfall that's 200 feet away from you, if you want all that in focus, you need a deeper depth of field. And that's where you would use a higher f-stop, meaning a closed down aperture. So that's the creative way of using your aperture to adjust how your photos actually look. Putting this all together, we have the exposure triangle, which is having the three manual settings: shutter speed, aperture, and ISO, and how you balance it. Most of this just takes practice and getting out there and experimenting. Sometimes you're going to want to have that wide open aperture with the blurry background. But if it's too bright, then you're going to have to use other settings like your ISO or shutter speed to make it darker. Sometimes you're going to be photographing something that's moving really fast, like someone running or a car driving by, and you want your shutter speed to be very quick, because if it's too slow, it's actually going to create motion blur in your camera as that object is moving past your frame. So if your shutter speed is really, really quick, meaning less light is going to enter the camera because of that quick shutter speed, you'll then have to use your other options like aperture or ISO to increase the exposure or to make it brighter. Now, I know this can be confusing, but like I said, the best thing to do is just get out there and practice. Adjust your settings, see what happens. If you have questions on what settings you should be using in a particular location or setting, let us know. Post a question to the course, join the Photography and Friends Facebook group, post a question there, and other students or instructors will help you out. Thank you so much for watching this lesson. I hope it helps, and we'll see you in the next one.